I stood there, the taste of cold gravy still on my tongue, as my son's hand met my cheek, and my daughter-in-law laughed. The house went silent except for the ringing in my ears. I didn't say a word, just walked upstairs, opened a folder I'd hoped I'd never need, and began writing the ending they didn't see coming. By the time the will was read, the laughter had finally stopped. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The turkey was dry, but Lorraine still chewed it like it mattered. She had basted the bird herself, slow-roasted it since dawn, and set the table with her mother's china, polished crystal glasses, silver flatware, linen napkins folded into triangles. Every seat was spaced evenly. Every detail had a place. Everything except the people sitting around it. Matthew poured himself another generous glass of Cabernet, ignoring the red wine already bleeding into the cloth beneath his plate. His tie was half askew, like he'd fought it off midway through the first course. Jenna, across from him, was already halfway through her second helping of stuffing, eyes flicking toward her phone whenever she thought no one noticed. Lorraine noticed. She always noticed. But today, she told herself, she would say nothing. She would just make it through dinner. That resolve lasted until the conversation turned to Matthew's next business venture. "I just need a few more weeks," he said, leaning back in his chair like a man owed something. "Once I pull that real estate deal together, I can pay off the last of the car. It's all just tied up in escrow right now." Lorraine reached for her glass of water. "Matthew, escrow closed on that property 2 months ago. I saw the documents." His eyes narrowed. "What documents?" She dabbed her mouth delicately with her napkin. "The ones you left on the printer tray. They said the funds were dispersed in August." The silence that followed was sharp enough to slice the air. Matthew stood so fast his chair scraped the hardwood. "You've been spying on me?" "I live here," she said evenly. "So does the printer." Then came the slap. Not hard, not brutal, but sharp, deliberate. More insult than injury. The shock didn't hit her cheek first. It hit her lungs. A brief, bitter gasp caught in her throat. Not from pain, but from the sheer audacity. Then came Jenna's laugh. A light, nasal snort. "Well, that's one way to settle things." Lorraine sat still for a beat. Her fork still rested beside her plate. Her glass trembled only slightly when she lifted it. She took one measured sip, then another. Her voice never came. She dabbed her mouth again, placed the napkin on her plate, and stood. No one moved. No one apologized. Jenna rolled her eyes. "She'll get over it," she mumbled, for no one in particular. Lorraine didn't turn back. Up the staircase she went. Slow, deliberate steps muffled against the runner she'd cleaned just that morning. Halfway up, she paused to straighten a crooked family photo. Matthew as a boy, missing his front teeth, hugging a dog they no longer had. She stared at it for exactly 1 second before turning the frame face down. In her bedroom, she closed the door quietly behind her. The light outside had faded from gray to deep blue, thick with the promise of snow. She didn't switch on the lamp. She moved through the room like someone who had rehearsed this moment 100 times in the quiet corners of her mind. At the far end of the room, behind a cedar chest filled with linens and old recipe cards, sat a writing desk. On its side, a brass key hung on a tiny hook. She inserted it into the bottom drawer, one she hadn't opened in over a year, and turned it. It clicked with the finality of a sealed vault. Inside lay a burgundy leather folder, its edges worn but corners intact. A single gold-embossed label was pressed into the front, "Last Rites." She pulled it out and placed it flat on the desk. The weight of it was familiar, heavy, chosen. With steady hands, she flipped it open. Inside were papers meticulously filed, power of attorney, property title, notarized affidavits, a certified will bearing Cliff Hartley's signature, and one final sheet she had written in her own hand the night Matthew moved back in, just in case. She read the top line again, like tasting something bitter and necessary. To be enacted upon physical harm or proof of coercive control. Below it, the initials of her attorney and executor. Legally binding. Irrevocable. Lorraine sat down, the folder in front of her, and began sorting the documents into piles by category. The sound of Jenna laughing from downstairs echoed faintly through the vents. Sharp, careless, slicing through the house like a blade. Her eyes didn't flicker. Her fingers didn't pause. She simply reached for her phone, opened her contact list, and tapped a name she hadn't needed in months. The call rang once, then twice. A woman answered. "This is Marla." Lorraine's voice came calm, clear, and colder than the Idaho air pressing against her windows. "Execute everything as planned." Morning light crawled through the curtains like a slow confession. Boise had frozen overnight, yards stiff with frost, the air so still it hummed. Lorraine watched from her kitchen window as a magpie pecked at the crust of snow on her porch rail, unbothered by the world collapsing neatly inside her house. She'd slept 4 hours, maybe less. The cheek where Matthew's hand had landed wasn't bruised, only faintly tender when she washed her face. Still, she noticed it. The same way she noticed cracks in paint, unpaid bills, or lies that didn't line up. By 7:30, she was dressed in charcoal wool, hair pinned tight, folder tucked beneath her arm like a verdict waiting to be read. Cliff Hartley's office sat in an old brick building downtown, the kind that still smelled faintly of dust and coffee grounds. The front desk was empty. A ceramic owl watched from the corner shelf. A faint tick of a grandfather clock filled the air. Marla Boyd was already waiting in the conference room. Pressed blazer, thermos of black coffee, and an expression that didn't need words. When Lorraine entered, Marla stood just long enough to squeeze her hand. "Morning, Lo." Lorraine set the folder on the table. "Execute everything as planned." No tremor in her voice, not a quiver. Marla exchanged a glance with Cliff as he came in, setting his briefcase beside the folder. He was the kind of man who always looked slightly unimpressed by chaos. Gray suit, dark eyes, movements careful as punctuation. He slid his reading glasses on and flipped the folder open. "You kept everything pristine, as usual." Lorraine gave a soft exhale. "It's the only thing left I can control," Paper whispered as he turned each page. Power of attorney, estate schedule, property deed. Then, 6 crisp pages labeled last will and testament. Cliff tapped one with his pen. "Updated 6 months ago? You still want the abuse clause to stand?" "I do." He nodded once. "You understand the clause can't be retracted after filing. Once it's entered into probate, there's no reversal, no appeal, no amendment." "That's the point, Cliff." Marla leaned forward. "I've already cleared the court slot for filing. Tuesday morning, quiet docket." Cliff's pen moved again, scratching neat initials beside his notary stamp. "I'll have the affidavit sealed and notarized before lunch. We'll keep an identical copy with my assistant and one in county records." Lorraine stirred the tea she'd brought in her thermos. 2 sugars, no cream, and watched the steam spiral upward like smoke from a burned bridge. "Would you like to read through the witness clause one more time?" Cliff asked. She shook her head. "I read it enough when I wrote it." Marla smirked faintly. "You always did write like a judge sentencing the world." Lorraine's lips curved just barely. "Someone has to." Cliff finished the last signature, pressed the embossed seal into the corner, and flipped the paper toward her for final confirmation. Lorraine signed her name in blue ink. Lorraine Archer, the loop of her L smooth, deliberate. When the pen left the page, something in the air shifted. A small, soundless detonation only the three of them seemed to feel. "That's it," Cliff said. "It's live now." For a moment, no one spoke. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere far off, swallowed by distance. Marla closed the folder, aligning the edges perfectly. "You ready for the fallout?" Lorraine took a sip of her tea. "They started the fire. I'm just naming the smoke." By the time she left the office, the sky had turned the color of old pewter. Her breath fogged the air as she crossed the parking lot. Every movement felt like choreography. Open car door, place folder on passenger seat, start engine, check mirrors. The drive home was silent except for the hum of tires over frozen asphalt. She passed holiday wreaths already hanging on neighbors' doors, bright ribbons fluttering in the cold wind. The contrast felt obscene, cheer strung over decay. Halfway up her street, she noticed something on her porch. A single red rose wrapped in cheap plastic left beside the welcome mat. No card. No note. She parked and stared at it for a long moment, the engine still running. Then she reached for her phone, dialed Marla again. When her friend answered, Lorraine's voice was calm, the same measured stillness as the night before. "Someone was here," she said. Marla's tone sharpened. "You sure?" Lorraine looked out at the rose, the thin plastic crinkling in the wind. "Positive. Want me to send someone by?" Lorraine smiled faintly, though no one saw. "No. Let them watch. They'll learn what losing really looks like." She ended the call, locked the doors, and sat for one long breath before stepping out into the freezing morning. The rose stayed where it was, its color too bright against the frost, like a warning wrapped in beauty. The deed was folded inside an old envelope, the paper creased where Lorraine had once shoved it into a cookbook and forgotten. She took it out on the kitchen table like a small private revelation, an old victory she'd never need to boast about. Her name filled the top line in neat mechanical script: Lorraine Archer. No joint owners. No signatures from Matthew or Jenna. The mortgage box read satisfied with a stamp dated decades ago. For a long moment she let the fact sit between her and the sink. Solid. Undeniable. The house had been hers before Matthew learned to ride a two-wheeler, before Jenna had a mortgage of her own. Her thumb smoothed the edge of the paper as if calming a restless animal. She didn't gloat. There was no appetite for triumph. Only the clean, clinical relief that comes from knowing the foundation beneath your feet is exactly where you left it. That relief turned to action the next morning. Lorraine called a locksmith, discreet, professional, who arrived in a plain white van smelling faintly of oil and winter gloves. He worked without comment, his hands quick and efficient, replacing deadbolts on the office and bedroom doors, installing a small digital pad on the front door that required a code Lorraine would keep to herself. Each new bolt felt like a sentence being served. Simple. Final. When the first lock clicked home, Matthew's voice came at the door like a thrown stone. "What is this?" he demanded, pounding with the back of his hand until the wood shuddered. His voice was loud enough to rouse neighbors 2 houses down. "Who changed the locks?" Lorraine stood at the top of the stairs, arms folded, watching him through the banister. Her face was a study in control, no tremor in the jaw, no frantic pleading in the eyes. "We'll let the attorney explain," she said, voice level and without flourish. She did not come down. The pounding stopped for half a breath, then started again, harder. Jenna's footsteps were rapid and small as she hurried to Matthew's side, phone cupped like a shield. "You can't do this to us," Jenna called up, voice edged with faux outrage. "This is my home. He grew up here. You're not the only one living here." She sounded rehearsed, the way someone sounds when they've practiced indignation in a mirror. Lorraine did not respond. She watched as Matthew's hands curled into fists, knuckles whitening, watched Jenna bend and whisper, an ugly, quiet conversation that needed no microphone. Downstairs, Marla arrived like a consequence in person, 2 legal envelopes in hand, a posture that made rooms straighten themselves. She did not look at Matthew. She slid a single sheet of paper beneath the hallway table and let it rest where anyone crossing the threshold would see it. Matthew snatched it up and read aloud, voice strained. Tenancy termination, 30-day notice on grounds of occupant caused abuse and property damage, effective immediately. The paper trembled between his fingers. For a second, the strata of family memory and entitlement and small mercies that had propped him up looked dangerously thin. He'd relied on inertia, on the fact that people like Lorraine made room for them, folded their problems into soft corners and hoped the world would keep turning. The world had not kept turning for him today. "You wouldn't throw out your own family," Jenna insisted, as if pleading could stitch what had been ripped. Marla's expression was razor-honed. "This is not about sentiment. It's lawful procedure." She folded her arms and let the statement sit like a bench in front of a judge. Matthew looked up then, and for the first time in years there was not the whine of entitlement, but something colder, dangerous and stripped of pretense. "You think this is over because I'm locked out? You think a piece of paper will stop me?" He slammed the termination notice against the banister and stormed toward the door as if he could storm back into a life he'd been treating like a bank account. Lorraine's hand tightened around the banister so that the knuckle whitened. She felt no fear. She felt a clarity that belonged to someone who had cataloged betrayal in a ledger and was simply checking items off. Matthew tried the knob. The new lock didn't give. He beat the door with his palm and cursed. Jenna filmed it, the screen a cruel recorder of their unraveling. Someone across the street glanced over, drawn by the commotion. Matthew stopped mid-curse and lifted his face to the window where the neighbor watched, then to the digital keypad, then back to Lorraine's upstairs silhouette. "You can't hide behind lawyers," he spat through the wood. "You'll regret this." Lorraine's answer was quiet enough that only the 3 people in the foyer heard it. "I already decided what I was done letting you take." Outside, the wind shifted. The house seemed suddenly smaller, the yard bright with a winter light that made everything hard-edged. Matthew pressed his forehead against the pane, breath fogging the glass, and his mouth shaped a promise that had lost its dignity. "I'll be back," he murmured, more threat than plan, and the sound of it clung to the stairwell like smoke. The keypad blinked its steady, indifferent blue, and the new locks hummed like a locked chorus. The rose on the mat shivered in the cold as if shrugging off petals of its own. Inside, Lorraine folded her hands and waited for the next move. The courthouse smelled faintly of toner and rain-wet coats. Somewhere down the hall, a copy machine hummed with bureaucratic indifference. Cliff Hartley carried the burgundy folder like a priest with a sacrament. 2 hands, spine upright, corners aligned. Lorraine walked beside him, her coat buttoned to the throat, face unreadable. Marla followed a step behind, clutching her briefcase and a thermos that steamed faintly in the cold. It was Tuesday morning. The docket was quiet, just as Marla had promised. No crowd, no reporters, only a clerk with chipped nail polish who stamped documents without looking up. Cliff laid the folder on the counter. "Filing for probate," he said. "Archer Estate, abuse exclusion clause active." The clerk glanced at the title page, her pen hovering for a second longer than usual. She stamped it once, twice. The seal pressed into the paper with a sound like a closing door. Lorraine didn't blink. She only watched the ink dry. When they left the courthouse, the sky hung low and white over downtown Boise, the kind of light that made everything feel paused. Snow threatened at the edge of the horizon. Lorraine drew in a slow breath of the icy air, the first clean inhale she'd taken in days. "It's done," Cliff said. Marla zipped up her coat. "Not quite. They'll come for the rest." By afternoon, they were all in Cliff's office, the same conference room as before, but now the energy hummed differently, charged and metallic. A small flash drive sat on the table between the coffee cups. Marla had brought it, clipped to a keychain shaped like an owl. Lorraine hadn't asked to see it, but she knew what it contained. Cliff inserted the drive into his laptop and turned the screen toward the room. Time-stamped. Thanksgiving Day, 5:18 p.m., he said, voice clinical. Angles clean, audio clear. You ready? Lorraine nodded once. The video flickered to life. The dining room, her dining room, appeared on screen. The crystal glasses, the dry turkey. Her own small correction about escrow echoing faintly. Then Matthew's face, red and arrogant. The sound of the slap. A flat, shocking crack that seemed louder in playback than it had been in real time. Then Jenna's laugh. That short nasal cut of amusement that had burned itself into Lorraine's memory. No one spoke for several seconds after the clip ended. Matthew's reflection in the laptop screen looked ghost-like, pale, hollow, all edges. He stood slowly, his chair legs scraping back against the floor. You recorded us? His voice cracked halfway through the word you. Marla's answer was immediate. My security camera covers that room. You knew that. Everyone did. Jenna scoffed, sitting rigid beside him. That's not admissible. It's an invasion of privacy. She didn't consent to being filmed in her own home. Cliff's gaze shifted toward her, slow and deliberate. Actually, it's fully admissible. The property owner consented. And the property owner, he said, nodding toward Lorraine, is Mrs. Archer. Jenna's jaw clenched so tight a vein pulsed near her temple. Lorraine stayed silent. She didn't need to add anything. The paper and the video spoke better than she could. Cliff clicked to a new page on his screen, a digital copy of the clause itself, displayed in clean black font. Any beneficiary proven to have engaged in physical or psychological harm toward the testator shall be immediately and permanently disqualified from inheritance or trusteeship. Beneath it, Lorraine's signature in blue ink. This is cruelty, Jenna said, voice pitching higher now. You're doing this to destroy your own family. Cliff looked mildly amused. No, this was drafted to protect Mrs. Archer's estate. You destroyed the family yourself. Matthew stared at the clause, unblinking. The confidence had drained from him, leaving something raw and lost in its place. So that's it? You just erase me, like I never existed? Lorraine finally spoke, her voice soft and precise. No, you existed. That's why this clause does too. The room went quiet again. Only the clock on the wall kept time. Jenna grabbed her purse, muttering something about lawyers who overreach. Her chair scraped loudly as she stood, but no one moved to stop her. Matthew remained, frozen in his seat. When he finally rose, his knuckles brushed the table edge. The flash drive still sat there, mute, undeniable. He glanced at it as though it might bite. Delete it, he said, barely above a whisper. Cliff's tone turned granite. It's already filed with the record. They left without another word. The echo of their footsteps lingered down the hallway long after the door closed. Lorraine stayed seated, her teacup cooling beside her hand. For the first time, she noticed the faint quiver in her fingers. Not fear, but release. Every sound in the room, the shuffle of paper, the hum of the heater, felt distant, like echoes from a world she'd already outlived. Marla placed a hand over hers, steady and firm. You did what most people never have the courage to do. Lorraine managed a small smile. Then I suppose I'd better have the courage to see what comes next. Outside, through the frost-laced window, she could see Matthew standing on the sidewalk. He wasn't moving, just staring up at the building, his face pale beneath the overcast sky. The flash drive light blinked once on Cliff's desk, a tiny pulse of red. Lorraine's gaze stayed on it as she whispered, almost to herself. Let the record show. I warned them. The red light blinked again. Steady, recording, like the heartbeat of something irreversible. Cliff's office felt colder than usual, not in temperature, but in tone. No idle conversation, no shuffling papers, just silence that prickled at the edge of breath. Lorraine sat at the far end of the conference table, posture straight, hands folded like she was waiting for a verdict she already knew. The burgundy folder lay closed in front of her now, not as a threat, but as a fulfilled promise. Matthew slouched into the chair across from her, arms crossed, face tight. Jenna arrived late, eyes red but dry, clutching a designer handbag like it might protect her from whatever was coming. Her mouth was pressed into a sympathetic frown, manufactured and sharp around the edges. Cliff closed the door gently and took his place at the head of the table. His hands moved with the calm certainty of someone holding an axe made of paper. "We're here to review the executed terms of Mrs. Archer's estate," he said. "Now that probate has been officially accepted and filed, the contents of the will are enforceable and final." He didn't look at Matthew or Jenna when he said it. He looked at Lorraine. She nodded once. Cliff turned a page, flattened it with his palm. Effective immediately, Mrs. Archer's estate, including all liquid assets, real property, retirement funds, personal valuables, and life insurance, is being transferred to the Veterans Housing Collective for Women and Children as named beneficiary. Matthew's jaw dropped open before the words even finished landing. "What the hell are you talking about?" Jenna blinked hard. "That's gotta be some placeholder, right? That's not serious." Cliff met them with lawyerly stillness. "It's entirely serious. The designation was filed months ago. The fund meets every federal and state requirement to receive charitable bequests. It's a permanent transfer, legally shielded from reversal or family claim." Matthew sat forward so fast his chair legs screeched. "You're giving our legacy to strangers?" Lorraine didn't flinch. "You earned strangers. You chose them the day you raised your hand to me." Jenna's voice broke, ragged and performative. "This is emotional abuse. You're cutting us off to make us suffer." Cliff didn't raise his voice, didn't shift. "No. This is the consequence of physical abuse." He slid a copy of the clause across the table again, but neither of them reached for it this time. Matthew's lip curled. "So what? You die and we get nothing? Not a cent? Not even the house?" Lorraine leaned back in her chair. Her voice was low, steady, and final. "You already got the house, Matthew. You just lived in it like you were renting Rage by the room." The silence that followed bent the air, taut and sharp. Jenna stood abruptly. "You know what? Keep it. We don't need this circus. We'll contest it." Cliff looked up slowly. "Then you should be aware the will is now a matter of public record." Major twist number 1. He pulled a slim bound packet from his briefcase and laid it in front of them. The seal of the county probate court was stamped on the cover. "Indexed yesterday morning. Available through the county's estate database. Anyone with a public login can view it, including the abuse exclusion clause and attached video documentation. Including local media." Matthew blinked like someone had just slapped him this time. "You filed the slap?" he said, voice thin and stunned. Cliff didn't blink. "We filed the truth." Lorraine said nothing. She reached into her purse, pulled out a check made out to the Veterans Fund for an interim donation. She laid it neatly in front of Cliff, her eyes never once moving toward her son. "You can't just bury us," Jenna said. But it came out small now. Less righteous fury, more the gasp of someone watching their oxygen run out. Lorraine looked at her, then Matthew. "You stood beside him when he struck me. You laughed. And then you waited to see if I'd fold." Her voice dropped to a whisper that still landed like thunder. Congratulations. You've inherited nothing. Matthew opened his mouth but couldn't find words. Jenna's face was blank, skin blotched beneath her foundation. Lorraine stood, collecting her coat, her folder, her silence. This is what it looks like when the abused stops apologizing. Cliff gathered the documents, methodical as ever. You're both advised not to contact Mrs. Archer directly moving forward. All communication must come through legal counsel. Matthew slumped into his chair like someone shot him in the spine. Jenna didn't sit. She only stood there, frozen, holding a purse that had nowhere to go. Lorraine reached the door, paused. You'll want to check the news tomorrow, she said, almost an afterthought. They didn't ask why. They didn't dare. She stepped out into the gray Boise afternoon as snow finally began to fall. The kind that doesn't stick yet, but promises it will soon. The clerk at the Ada County Courthouse didn't think much of the Archer filing at first. Just another name in a stack of post-holiday probate actions. But something about the seal, the crispness of the clause language, and the time-stamped affidavit raised eyebrows. Then she opened the attached video file. By noon, a redacted version of the will was officially posted to the public archive. Case ID 25PB9013. By 4 p.m., 3 estate lawyers had flagged the clause. By sundown, it was circulating in a private forum for elder law specialists under the thread title, Abuse, Exclusion, and Action, Cleanest Filing We've Seen in Years. In her kitchen, Lorraine stirred a pot of soup as if none of it concerned her. The snow had thickened. Across the street, someone had salted their driveway too late, and a FedEx truck fishtailed slightly before righting itself. Her radio murmured softly from the windowsill, tuned to classical. No news. She didn't need to hear it to know what was coming. Marla called just after 6. Thought you'd want to know, it's spreading. Fast? Lorraine asked, sipping from a ceramic mug. Faster than I expected. A probate judge from St. Louis messaged me. Said she's forwarding it to her law school dean. It's textbook clean. Lorraine didn't gloat. She just said, good, and stirred again. And, Marla added with a laugh like a knife tapping glass, I shared it with the old guard, our little cabal of cranky retirees, told them precedent's a dish best served documented. Lorraine let the silence breathe before answering. Let them serve it cold. It lasts longer that way. At 7:14 p.m., Jenna sent a text. Lorraine, you need to release a statement. You've ruined our lives. The video's been shared. The fund is bragging about you online. This is slander. 10 minutes later, another. Take it down. Tell them you lied. We'll forget this happened. Just fix it. Lorraine stared at her screen, thumb hovering over the reply button. She didn't blink. She didn't hesitate. She typed, that wasn't a statement, that was evidence, and hit send. Matthew, meanwhile, took a different route. He launched a blog. The real story behind my mother's will. The first post went live at midnight. He called himself a scapegoat son, claimed elder abuse by an aging narcissist. He used words like manipulated, framed, and cut out for political optics. He described Jenna as a victim. Called the Veterans Fund a woke laundering scam. The comment section stayed open for less than 6 hours. The backlash came in waves. A user posted screenshots of the court filing. Another linked the slap clip. Blurred, yes, but still clear enough. Someone else found Jenna's LinkedIn and dropped her company's ethics policy. Then came the headlines. Boise woman leaves, 1.2 million estate to Veterans Fund after Thanksgiving assault. Abuse clause sets legal precedent. Archer case draws national eyes. Not just a will, it's a warning. Matthew stopped posting by morning. Lorraine didn't watch the interviews, didn't check her name in search bars. She turned off notifications entirely. Instead, she spent the next day on the back porch, with a space heater at her feet, an Afghan over her knees, and a notebook open in her lap. The notebook wasn't a journal. It was a log. Dates, responses, outcomes. Not one word wasted on emotion. Luke, the handyman from down the block, dropped off new salt for the stairs and asked if she needed anything else. She looked up from the notebook. "Have you ever replaced exterior cameras?" Luke blinked. "I've installed a few, depends where. High corners, driveway, back gate. Discreet but clear." He nodded. "I can get them ordered by Friday." "Good," Lorraine said, and returned to her notes. Later that night, Jenna stood in her bathroom mirror with her phone held high and a full face of regret. Her mascara ran just enough to look sincere. She hit record. "I've been quiet for days, but the truth needs to be said. We're not perfect, but what's happening to our family is character assassination. My husband and I never meant harm. We were provoked. This isn't justice. It's revenge in disguise." The video uploaded to her stories at 10:36 p.m. By 11:08, it was taken down. The comments had not been kind. Screenshots lived on. The internet did not forget. Cliff texted Lorraine the next morning. "FYI, public interest is growing. There's talk of this being cited in the Spring Bar Association ethics panel. You may get requests for interviews." Lorraine stared out at the street, watching Matthew's car still parked in the same spot, unmoved for days. Ice crusted over the windshield like nature had decided to erase him inch by inch. She replied, "No interviews, no quotes. Just let the paper speak." Her final line hung in the message box for a moment before she added one more. "They tried to rewrite me. I just wrote back. With law." Lorraine arrived at the county building with the same folder she'd carried through every legal turn since Thanksgiving. By now, the weight of it was second nature. She could feel where the eviction forms were without looking. The clerk on the second floor, a young man with scuffed boots and a tired smile, flipped through the documents, eyes darting to the clause titles. "Do you want this posted at the property or served by mail?" "Both," Lorraine said. He nodded, stamped the top page, and slid a bright yellow notice across the counter. 30 days. Non-renewal of tenancy. She folded it carefully, just once, and slipped it into her coat pocket. Outside, the wind had sharpened into something spiteful. Downtown Boise always turned mean in January. Sunless skies and sidewalks slick with melt ice that refroze by dusk. Lorraine walked back to her car without a word, her boots leaving no impressions in the wind-hardened snow. Matthew read the notice in the kitchen with a mug of coffee trembling in his hand. He hadn't spoken to Lorraine since the will went public. He had avoided her eyes in the hallway, moved out of the way when she came in from the cold. But now he stormed to the living room doorway, like someone remembering they were supposed to be angry. "This is my childhood home," he said, holding the paper up like it was an accusation. Lorraine didn't bother standing. She kept reading her paper, flipping to the next page before replying. "Then you should have acted like my child." The sentence didn't rise. It landed, quiet and surgical. Matthew scoffed, the paper shaking. "You can't just erase 40 years with paperwork." Lorraine looked up. "I'm not erasing them. I'm recording how they ended." He stared at her, lips parting like he had something more to say, but the words wouldn't come. He left the notice on the side table and walked out onto the front lawn without a coat. Jenna saw him through the window and followed, dressed in athleisure and designer boots far too thin for the snow. She caught up to him at the mailbox, where he stood staring down the street, like the neighborhood owed him something. "She'll never actually follow through," Jenna whispered. "Not with everyone watching. You heard what the neighbors said at the block party." But she was wrong. Lorraine stepped outside, coat already buttoned, her breath ghosting out in front of her. A few doors down, Mrs. Everett from the end unit stood on her porch in slippers. Watering frozen planters like routine could keep her world stable. Jenna saw her too and raised her voice, theatrical and panicked. "You're kicking out your own son and daughter-in-law? Right in front of the neighbors? You want them to think you're heartless?" Lorraine didn't flinch. "If they've seen what you've done, they understand why I'm done." The wind whipped Jenna's hair into her face, but the message had already landed. Mrs. Everett gave a small nod from her porch. Nothing dramatic, just the subtle, solemn agreement of someone who knew what it meant to survive betrayal without ceremony. Jenna turned to Matthew, eyes wild now. "Say something. You're just going to let her throw us out?" Matthew was staring at his feet, as if the snow-covered grass had more to offer than the life he'd squandered inside. By afternoon, Marla arrived with 2 boxes of smart security gear and her reading glasses perched low on her nose. "I told you, if we're securing peace, we're doing it right," she said. Lorraine held the front door while Marla brought in the gear. Digital locks, motion-triggered cameras, a backup battery unit. They worked quietly, moving with purpose and efficiency. The living room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and hollow apologies. By sundown, the new system was synced. Lorraine's phone buzzed once to confirm the code had registered. Marla held up the test fob. "1 tap and you'll get alerts. Motion, entry, any attempts at override." Lorraine looked at the lock. "It's strange how quickly you stop trusting people, and how much faster you start trusting machines." "They don't lie," Marla replied. Jenna came home just after 6, arms full of grocery bags she clearly hoped would soften the mood. When the door lock didn't recognize her, the screen blinked red. She banged twice, plastic bags rattling, her voice muffled through the storm door. "Lorraine, it's freezing! Open the door!" Lorraine stood in the hallway, phone in hand, staring at the live feed. Jenna's face looked warped through the frosted glass, both familiar and foreign, like a version of someone Lorraine no longer claimed. She didn't move to unlock it. She simply tapped the screen once, watched the system go live, and turned off the hallway light. Behind her, the house fell silent except for the faint, satisfied chime of a system fully armed. Lorraine held her phone steady, angling it toward the long gouge across the inside of the pantry door. She didn't zoom in. She didn't need to. The lighting caught every inch of splintered wood, every dent like a confession pressed into grain. Photo saved. She moved to the basement. The washer was tilted off its base, a rusted screwdriver still lodged in the drainage pipe. In the corner, a shelving unit she'd owned since 1984 was cracked in half, jagged and unsalvageable. 3 unopened paint cans had been upended across the concrete floor. White streaks bled across the gray like vandalized silence. Photo saved. Then the garage. Then the guest bathroom. Then the cabinet doors. Jenna had pulled off their hinges during what Lorraine could only guess had been a tantrum disguised as cleaning. Upstairs, a frame that once held Lorraine's college degree lay shattered beside the banister. She crouched and picked up the glass edges with latex gloves, dropping each piece carefully into a Ziploc. Her fingers didn't shake. If anything, they moved with the calm precision of someone taking inventory before insurance adjusters came through. 2 hours later, Marla arrived with the clipboard, measuring tape, and a frown sharp enough to draw blood. "You said it was bad?" she muttered, stepping over the ripped hallway rug. "You didn't say it was deliberate." "It's not neglect," Lorraine agreed. "It's spite." Marla spent the next hour cataloging damage with the tenacity of a war claims officer, photographing, measuring, cross-referencing the original home inventory Lorraine had compiled years ago. They found broken molding behind the coat closet, scuff marks in the drywall near Matthew's old bedroom, and an entire section of the backyard fence knocked loose. "Too much to be random," Marla said, snapping a picture of the splintered gate. "They had 30 days to leave," Lorraine said, "but they started tearing it down in 3. Cliff called at 5:22 p.m. "I'm drafting the civil claim now," he said. "We'll file for property damage, malicious defacement, and tenant violation of contract. Want me to include estimated labor?" "Include everything," Lorraine replied. "Down to the hour it'll take to repaint the pantry." Cliff's voice didn't falter. "We'll need witness statements, even informal. Think the neighbors saw anything?" Lorraine glanced toward the window. Mrs. Everett was once again watering frozen soil like it mattered. "They saw enough," she said. At 6:47 p.m., Jenna knocked on the door, not with her usual impatience but with a fluttery hesitation, like she was hoping to be mistaken for someone softer. Lorraine opened it halfway, enough to make the point. Enough to make Jenna see the camera above the entryway blinking steadily red. Jenna held her palms up. "Let's not escalate this. We're moving out. We'll be gone in 2 weeks. There's no need to drag this through court." Lorraine didn't blink. "You escalated it. I'm resolving it." Jenna's mouth fell open, just enough to suggest that she expected mercy where there would be none. "I didn't break anything," she added quickly, gesturing behind her. "That was—" Matthew got angry. "But it wasn't— the fence, the bathroom, the broken cabinet doors. They didn't destroy themselves," Lorraine said. "And you watched it happen?" She closed the door slowly, without slamming it. By nightfall, a cruiser pulled up to the curb. The officer stepped out, bundled in a dark patrol coat, holding a clipboard and a flashlight. Lorraine greeted him on the porch with a manila envelope of photos and printed timestamps. "Domestic vandalism," she said, handing over the evidence like a ledger. "They're still on the property until the end of the month. But the damage was done before they left." The officer nodded. "We'll file a formal warning and document it with the city. If anything else happens, don't wait. Just call." As he left, Lorraine remained on the steps. Snow began to fall again, slow, dry flakes that landed on her coat and didn't melt. Inside, her phone vibrated with a text from Cliff. "Draft complete. Filing in the morning. We'll serve them before noon." She didn't reply. She walked through her home like she was walking through the shell of a war that hadn't quite ended, checking rooms, noting damage, locking doors. When she entered the guest room, something caught her eye. One of the boxes Matthew had left behind. It had been taped hastily, labeled in slanted black Sharpie. Photos, Dad's tools, keepsakes. She crouched, slid it open, and lifted the first item, a broken picture frame. The photo inside showed Matthew at 16, grinning wide beside a fishing pole he never once baited himself. Lorraine stared at it for a long moment. Then she set it aside, pulled out the next item, and began sorting. It started quietly. Just a ripple, not a wave. The Monday after the police report, Jenna showed up to work at the downtown design firm dressed in soft grays and humble smiles. Her coworkers smiled back, cautious, the way people do when they've read something they're not supposed to discuss. By midweek, HR sent her an email marked confidential. "We'd like to schedule a brief conversation regarding a personal matter that's come to our attention." The personal matter was the vandalism report. Someone in accounting had recognized her name in the court filing, confirmed it against a public database, and forwarded it, quietly, efficiently, to the firm's managing partner. They didn't fire her. Not yet. But by Friday, she'd been placed on administrative review, pending evaluation of character alignment and brand integrity. The words stung more than a pink slip would have. Lorraine found out the same afternoon. Marla told her over lunch at the small diner they always preferred. Cheap coffee, red booths, the smell of frying bacon seeping into every conversation. "Corporates crawling all over Jenna's digital history," Marla said, breaking her toast in half. "The internet never forgets. But apparently neither do HR departments." Lorraine stirred her tea. "I didn't wish her harm. I just wanted peace." You wanted accountability, Marla corrected. Peace is what you get after that. Outside, snowplows dragged down Main Street, leaving jagged ribbons of salt behind them. It had been weeks since the slap, but the bruises that weren't physical had taken longer to fade. Lorraine's phone buzzed as she reached for her check. A voicemail. Unknown number. She pressed play. A man's voice. Steady, pastoral, gentle in the way men sound when they've been taught to apologize on behalf of others. Mrs. Archer, this is Reverend Collins from Grace Fellowship. I just wanted to say, we're sorry. That never should have happened to you. You've shown people here what silence costs. God bless you. Lorraine's hand stilled over the napkin. She hadn't attended that church in years. The message lingered, uninvited but strangely kind. Marla noticed her expression. Good news? Good intention, Lorraine said softly. That's rarer. That evening, Cliff called with updates. His tone, for once, carried a flicker of satisfaction. The Veterans Fund is getting local traction, he said. A few donors mentioned your name in connection to the gift. They're planning a matching drive. Over 100,000 pledged already. Lorraine exhaled. Then at least something good came from the noise. It's more than noise now, he replied. It's movement. She smiled faintly. Careful, Cliff. You're starting to sound sentimental. I'm starting to sound impressed. By Thursday, Jenna's apology appeared online. A video, again, but this time filmed in her living room, lights dim, voice trembling. I want to make amends, she began, eyes glassy. Things got out of control. None of us are perfect. I loved my mother-in-law, and I never imagined things would go this far. I just want closure. The comment section didn't wait. Closure doesn't come after a slap. You laughed when it happened. Closure isn't yours to demand. We saw the video. Try repentance, not PR. Within hours, she deleted it. Screenshots lived on. Her employer didn't need to investigate further. Saturday brought sunlight, thin and pale, like a truce the weather wasn't sure it wanted to keep. Lorraine sat by the window with her notebook, noting progress on repairs. The pantry door had been replaced, the fence fixed. She was cataloging calm again, line by line. Marla stopped by mid-afternoon, a folder in hand and a gleam of mischief in her eyes. Don't look at me like that, Lorraine said, pouring tea. You've brought something ridiculous. Marla grinned. The Community Council wants to nominate you for the Civic Resilience Award, public leadership, women's advocacy, the whole parade. Lorraine's laugh was quiet, disbelieving. I didn't survive to get applause. I survived to end the cycle. Marla softened. Still, it wouldn't hurt to let them thank you. Let the fund thank me, Lorraine said, lifting her cup. That's enough legacy. By evening, she'd almost forgotten about the repairs, the donations, the attention, until the mail came. A thick envelope, hand-delivered, her name printed neatly on the front. She slid it open, expecting another insurance document. Instead, the letterhead at the top read Ada County Family Court. Her eyes scanned the first line. Petition for dissolution of marriage, Jenna Archer versus Matthew Archer. She read it twice. The page trembled faintly in her hand, not from emotion, but from the faint thrill of poetic justice uncoiling in silence. Down the street, she could hear wind chimes knocking against each other, metal against metal, discordant, cold. Lorraine folded the letter once, slid it into her notebook, and wrote a single line beneath the day's entries. The house wasn't the only thing she's leaving behind. She closed the cover. The clock ticked once, deliberate, before the room returned to stillness. The file came through in Marla's usual way, quietly, without preamble. Just a single email with the subject line, "You'll want to read this." Attached was a scan of Jenna's court filing. Lorraine opened it on her tablet, already knowing the headline, but not the flavor. The language inside was unexpected, not frantic, not angry, just calibrated, cold. Petitioner alleges patterns of verbal intimidation, financial control, and diminished mental health due to the hostile living environment, no minor children, division of joint assets requested. Marla had highlighted one line in yellow. I no longer feel safe continuing this marriage. Lorraine sat with that for a while, long enough for her tea to go tepid beside her. She wasn't laughing anymore, she murmured, almost to herself. By noon, Cliff had looped in his assistant and added a new folder to Lorraine's legal archive. Archer vs. Archer, filed Jan 20. He labeled it not under threat, but under precedent, noted for record keeping, not retaliation. She's not a danger anymore, he told Lorraine on the phone, but she is a reminder of what silence enables and what humiliation conceals. Lorraine didn't argue. She just said, "File it," and moved on. That evening, she sat at her kitchen counter, re-recording her voicemail greeting. The old one had been polite. "Hi, you've reached Lorraine Archer. Please leave a message and I'll get back to you." Now she spoke slowly, clearly, each word pressed into the air like a notice nailed to a courthouse door. If this is about property or the past, don't bother. If you're calling out of guilt, call someone who forgives. And if you're hoping I haven't changed, you've dialed the wrong decade. She saved the message, set the phone down, stared out the window. The wind was high again, lifting leaves that had frozen in place weeks ago and sending them tumbling across the pavement like scattered thoughts that no longer belonged to anyone. Matthew left the next morning. No note, no goodbye. Lorraine woke to find his car gone, the spare bedroom empty, and a few trash bags left slouched by the garage. A worn flannel shirt hung on the back of a dining chair. Forgotten or abandoned. It didn't matter which. She didn't check the security footage. She didn't need to see him go. When Marla stopped by later that day, she found Lorraine in the backyard pruning frost-bitten branches. "He's gone," Marla said, not asking. "I know." "He say anything?" Lorraine clipped another branch. "No, but silence finally suits him." At noon, Cliff called again, this time with news she didn't expect. Matthews filed a countersuit against Jenna over joint accounts. Lorraine raised an eyebrow. He's suing her now? Claiming financial fraud. Says she moved money from their business account into her personal checking before the filing. He wants damages. Damages, Lorraine repeated. From a marriage that was bankrupt before the wedding cake thawed. Cliff paused. Do you want updates on their case? Lorraine didn't answer immediately. She looked at her notebook. The day's entry was half finished. Fence repaired. Voicemail updated. Car gone. She closed it. No. Let them devour each other in silence. That's not my ending. Later that night, she passed the guest room and saw something that stopped her. A half-full box still sat near the wall, missed during cleanup. She opened it, expecting more broken frames or old tools. Instead, inside were 2 untouched candles, a tin of mints, and a single manila envelope labeled Matt's stuff. Do not toss. She pulled it out. Inside, a photo strip from a mall booth. Jenna and Matthew at 25. His head tilted toward hers. Her eyes bright, unaware of what they'd both become. She stared at it, not with sentiment, but with detachment. A reminder that even rot begins somewhere sweet. She slid the photo back inside, sealed the envelope, and placed it near the front door with tomorrow's trash. As she turned off the hallway lights, her phone buzzed again. This time a number she didn't know. No voicemail, no message, just the name on the screen. Matthew Archer. She stared at it until it stopped ringing. Then she blocked the number. No hesitation, no drama, just a clean click into silence. The card arrived in an envelope with no return address, just Lorraine's name printed in jittery cursive, postmarked from a small town somewhere west, the kind of place Matthew might pass through if he didn't want to be found. Inside, a cheap off-the-shelf apology card, cream background, gold script, the kind that tried to seem heartfelt but didn't try very hard. On the inside, 2 lines scribbled in pen. Sorry for everything. Hope someday you understand. Matt. No punctuation, no effort, not even a date. Lorraine stared at it for a moment. Then, without a sigh or a second thought, she walked to the hallway cabinet, pulled down a slim black accordion folder labeled in her handwriting, "Too late." She placed the card between a cease and desist letter from 2011 and a faded birthday card Jenna had once mailed 2 days late, with a Starbucks gift card she never activated. The folder snapped shut with a sound like a judgment rendered. Cliff met her at the courthouse annex later that week. They sat in a quiet conference room with no windows, just a fake ficus and the smell of dust on upholstery. He laid a single sheet of paper in front of her. Her post-will letter. The final one. The last word that would outlast her. "You sure you want to keep it this short?" he asked. Lorraine read the words again, unmoved. "To whomever finds this after I'm gone, if you're reading this, then everything went exactly as it should have." She tapped the paper twice, then signed it. "Let the paper speak. I'm not revising history." Cliff nodded, slid the page into a document sleeve, and tucked it into the legal file. "Executor?" he asked. "Still want to make the change?" She handed him the paperwork she'd brought from home. "Transfer it to the Veterans Director. The fund's already done more with 100,000 than Matthew ever did with my name." He took the document without another word, flipping to the signature page and initialing the change. On Saturday, Luke came by just after lunch, a hardware bag slung over his shoulder, his breath visible in the winter air. "Driveway camera install, right?" he asked. Lorraine nodded. "High corners, front and back. Motion activated. I don't need another knock I didn't see coming." He got to work without small talk. Luke had never been one for chatter. Lorraine liked that about him. By sunset, 4 cameras had been mounted, synced, and tested. Lorraine stood at the threshold with her phone, watching as live feeds blinked into existence one by one. "You want alerts on your lock screen or only in the app?" Luke asked, holding his drill like a shield. "App's fine," she replied. "If someone's coming, I won't be surprised." He gave her a quiet nod, packed up his tools, and walked back down the driveway as the porch light clicked on behind him. Marla called Sunday morning. "They're engraving your name now." Lorraine sat at the kitchen table, notebook open to a fresh page, the steam from her coffee curling upward like a thought unfinished. "On what?" "Plaques. For the new expansion building. Veterans Housing Fund wants to dedicate a wall to major contributors. You're at the top." Lorraine exhaled through her nose. "You told them I wanted anonymity." "I told them you wanted privacy. They're keeping it tasteful. First name only, bronze plate. You won't be flashy. You'll be foundational." For the first time in weeks, Lorraine smiled. Not wide, not smug, just something small that reached the eyes. "Let them build with it," she said. "Something real." Later that afternoon, Cliff updated the file one last time. He added a brief addendum to her living trust, the kind of line that most people never thought to write. Per client instruction, surviving family members may not be notified of death. No one questioned it. No one argued. He printed the clause, initialed it, filed it into the folder beneath Lorraine's will, beside a copy of her voice memo and a notarized schedule of asset disbursement set to execute within 12 hours of her death. He paused, hand still resting on the folder. The room felt heavier than it had moments before. Not sad, not final. Just complete. That night, Lorraine stood in the hallway watching the blinking blue of the security panel, now fully connected to her phone, her executor, and the backup server Cliff insisted she keep in a fireproof box. She ran her fingers over the folder marked "Too Late" one last time, then slid it back into the cabinet, locked it, and walked down the hallway with slow, measured steps. As she passed her old family portrait, the one with Matthew at 10, the dog with one ear up, Jenna holding a champagne glass in the background, she didn't stop to look. But she didn't take it down either. It could stay. Not as a memory, as a warning. The ledger was digital now. Lorraine kept no physical checkbooks, no dusty file drawers. Just a password-protected vault Cliff had set up 3 years ago, biometric secured, backed up to 3 encrypted servers, one out of state. She logged in on a quiet Tuesday morning. The numbers glowed against the dark interface. Precise, cold, clean. Final estate value, 125, 581 to 17. Real estate, $645,000 retirement funds, $410,233 savings and liquid accounts, $150,000 for this 17. Everything in her name. Every account unlinked. No joint access. No familial footprints. Matthew had never been listed on any form, not even as emergency contact. Jenna hadn't even made it into the directory. The numbers didn't make her proud. They made her still. They were evidence of quiet discipline, of decades spent saying no to herself so someone else could say yes. But the someone had squandered it, and the no had finally outlived them all. Marla stopped by mid-morning with a thermos of chamomile and her laptop under one arm. She settled at the dining table like she belonged there. "I just pulled your vault's backup logs," she said, pulling up the mirrored interface on her screen. "Everything's intact. Latest sync was last night at 1:07 a.m. Nothing touched. Nothing exposed." "Good," Lorraine replied without looking up. She was reviewing her living trust again, reading every line as if it might one day betray her. Marla leaned back. "You know, a lot of people your age start worrying about legacy. They get anxious, want visibility, press releases, names in newsletters." Lorraine didn't flinch. "My name is on a plaque. My money will build housing. My story's public record. That's more legacy than most get. Or deserve." Marla smiled quietly. "Can't argue with that." Later that afternoon, Cliff called with the final transfer schedule. "If something happens," he said gently, "everything releases within 12 hours. The fund gets first disbursement. Executor handles second phase gifts. The estate's airtight. It's ready." Lorraine closed her notebook with a soft thud. "It's strange," she said. "People spend their lives pretending money is power. But real power is deciding who never touches it." "You sure you want no notifications sent to Matthew or Jenna?" Cliff asked. "Not even a certified statement?" "Not even smoke signals," she said. He chuckled once, then paused. "You've rewritten your legacy, Lorraine, word by word." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. By early evening, a screenshot found its way to Marla's inbox. A Facebook post, Jenna's profile. "Some people hoard their money and die alone. That's not strength. It's fear in a nicer coat." No direct mention. No name tagged. But the implication was as obvious as the snow blanketing Boise. The comment section wasn't generous this time. You laughed at the slap. Pretty rich calling someone else afraid. Maybe she just didn't want her abusers to inherit her pain. Marla forwarded the screenshot to Cliff with no subject line. Then she sent it to Lorraine, just in case. Lorraine read it on her phone while watering the houseplants near the bay window. The African violet had bloomed again, small purple defiance in ceramic. She didn't respond. She simply placed the phone face down and refilled the watering can. At night, she checked the digital vault one final time. Not for anxiety, not for fear, but for certainty. Everything was where it needed to be. Nothing owed, nothing shared. Her fingers hovered over the Log Out button, then moved to the Estate Overview tab. A small box displayed her listed heirs: Women's Veterans Housing Collective, National Division. Below that, Executor, Director, Housing Collective. No one else. She closed the laptop and turned out the light. Outside, snow fell in clean sheets. No tire tracks. No footprints. The world, for once, didn't seem like it was chasing her. Inside, Lorraine sat by the fireplace, a blanket over her legs, and opened a fresh notebook. On the first page, she wrote only one sentence. They thought they were stealing comfort. They never saw what I was saving. The wire transfer cleared on a Friday. Lorraine watched the confirmation email arrive without blinking. The amount, $500,000 a year, sat bold and unshakable in the subject line, as if it had always been destined to leave her hands. She didn't breathe a sigh of relief. She didn't smile. She only stood, walked over to the printer, and pulled the receipt as it warmed its way into the tray. "Now," she whispered, folding it neatly into an envelope, "they'll build something that doesn't collapse under gratitude." By Monday morning, the board of the Women's Veterans Housing Collective had sent a formal letter of thanks, hand-signed by every member, bound in a blue linen folder. A single line at the bottom of the last page stood out. "You've given more than money. You've given them back the right to feel safe in silence." Lorraine reread that sentence twice before she placed the letter in her fireproof vault, between the deed to the house and the original will. That same afternoon, an invitation arrived, printed on thick cardstock, the edges embossed with the collective's emblem, a sun rising behind a row of homes. "You are cordially invited to the Veterans Housing Collective's expansion groundbreaking ceremony. March 15th, downtown Boise Civic Center. You will be recognized as a legacy builder." Lorraine stared at the RSVP line. "No need to respond," it said. "You're already expected." She placed it on her refrigerator with a magnet shaped like an Idaho potato and wrote the date in her notebook in tidy blue ink. No ceremony, she had once said, but maybe presence didn't have to mean performance. The press got wind of the story a week later. It wasn't a media circus, just a thoughtful piece in the Idaho Statesman, written by a woman journalist who had read the court filings herself. "Local woman rewrites her will after Thanksgiving assault." The headline didn't sensationalize. It steadied. The article itself referenced a woman in her 70s who used her estate to create change, quietly, legally, irrevocably. Matthew wasn't named. But the phrase, "a documented act of familial violence," appeared once, italicized for emphasis. So did the laughter that followed. Online, the article gained quiet traction, shared not for shock, but for inspiration. Threads appeared on estate planning forums. Nonprofits circulated it. One reader commented, "Sometimes the strongest legacy is what you deny to those who expected it by default." Another, "We teach women to forgive everything. She taught us that protection can look like paperwork." Lorraine didn't reply. She didn't repost. She only clicked the article once and bookmarked it under a folder labeled Proof of Life. Jenna tried to comment. Not under her own name. Those accounts had long been silent. But the screen name JTruthA8 posted under the article's Facebook repost. "We don't know her side. You're all just clapping for revenge dressed up as empowerment." The comment was flagged within 4 minutes, blocked by the page's admin, deleted by the site. No one responded, except one anonymous reply that remained before the thread was locked. Some people leave a legacy. Some get written out of it. On a Wednesday, Cliff met Lorraine at her dining table with a folder thicker than usual. "You're sure?" he asked. Lorraine didn't hesitate. "Listed at market value, no open house." "Quiet listing. Cash only." He nodded. "I have a buyer who specializes in pre-screened sales. No questions, no foot traffic. Closing can happen in 10 days. I don't need 10. She sold the house. The closing happened the following Monday. No photos on Zillow. No key exchange on the front lawn. Just a wire confirmation and a clean walkthrough handled by Marla and Cliff. Lorraine never looked back. Instead, she moved into Juniper Heights, a high-end secured retirement community on the northern edge of the city. Gated, quiet, with monitored access and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a private garden trail. Her new apartment came fully furnished. Pale oak floors, soft green walls, a fireplace that worked by remote. Luke helped her move in. 2 suitcases, a fireproof lockbox, and her notebooks. Looks like a fresh start, he said, setting the last bag by the closet. Lorraine walked to the window, watched the snow settle over the manicured garden below. No traffic, no shouting, no footsteps trying to catch her in the hallway. No, she said, half smiling. This isn't a start. It's the first room that was ever only mine. Back at her old address, the house stood silent. Empty, cleaned, deed transferred. On the front porch, the rose bush Matthew had once watered as a child had frozen back to its roots, waiting for a spring that would never come. No one was coming back for it, and no one would be told where she went. Juniper Heights didn't list its residents online, no mailboxes out front, no names on buzzers. Deliveries stopped at the gate. Visitors had to be pre-approved with a government-issued ID and a background check on file. Most people thought that kind of privacy was only reserved for diplomats or celebrities. Lorraine Archer thought it should have always belonged to the women who'd survived people like her son. Her lease had gone through in one day. The closing on the house wrapped in less than a week. Cliff handled everything. The buyer never blinked at the no contingency clause. All cash. No inspection. No questions. She didn't take much with her. Only what mattered. By the time the sun rose over the quiet, tree-lined trails behind Juniper Heights, Lorraine's entire past had been reduced to 2 suitcases and 1 fireproof vault. And she had never breathed easier. She took to the place quickly. The air was softer here, filtered by evergreens and landscaped peace. Her windows overlooked a garden path lined with low shrubs, seasonal blooms, and a wooden bench beneath a steel pergola. She walked it every morning, black coffee in one hand, phone in the other, silent. The residents nodded when she passed, but they didn't ask questions. That was part of the draw. No, what brings you here? No gentle digs into family photos. Just peace. Unspoken, earned. Luke visited once a week. He never knocked loud. Just one tap. Groceries in hand, hat always in place. He stocked her fridge without being told where things belonged, refused to stay for coffee, but always replaced the water filter and asked if the smoke detectors had blinked recently. He never brought up Matthew, or Jenna, or the house. Lorraine never offered details. Their silence wasn't cold, it was intact. On one visit, as he checked the security panel by the front door, he paused and looked around. Everything feels safe now? Lorraine took a long sip of her coffee before answering. Safe isn't a feeling, she said. It's a decision you stop negotiating. Luke didn't nod, didn't smile, just understood. Marla came the next day with a tin of lemon shortbread and a folder labeled Life Preferences in bold print. I'm redoing my own, she said, setting it beside the cookies. Thought you might want to do the same. You know, funeral details, final letters, medical directives, all the things no one talks about until someone's already dying. Lorraine raised a brow. You always know how to sweeten a room. Marla laughed, peeling back the foil on the tin. Someone has to prep the exits. You've already rewritten your ending. They sat on the balcony in the winter light, the kind that felt clean even when it was cold. Lorraine flipped through the packet page by page. When she reached the emergency contact form, she paused. For a moment, she held the pen over the blank line. Her hand hovered. Not because she didn't know who to write, but because this was the first time in 40 years it wasn't a lie. She wrote, Marla Boyd Cliff Hartley Director. WVHC, no son, no daughter-in-law, no second guessing. Marla looked over and grinned. You outlived the damage. Lorraine tapped the paper once. I didn't just outlive it, I named it, then I filed it. Then I built something on top of the ashes. The next morning, Lorraine received a voicemail she didn't expect, a number she didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was clipped and hurried. Female, possibly early 20s. Hi. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm calling from Jenna Archer's former employer. She listed you as a personal reference years ago. Must have been a mistake. We were trying to verify some details, but never mind. Sorry again. The message ended in static. Then silence. Lorraine didn't delete it. She saved it. Not for revenge, or for proof. Just to remember the sound of someone realizing they no longer had access. She added the number to her block list, then deleted the contact. That evening, as the garden lights flickered on below, she pulled a fresh notebook from the shelf, turned to a blank page and wrote, This address isn't hidden. It's earned. I don't owe them the door. She capped the pen, leaned back, and listened to the stillness around her. No footsteps, no yelling, no warnings in disguise, only a heater humming, and wind against glass. And the locked door they would never find. Lorraine opened the final documentation folder with hands that no longer hesitated. The spine cracked slightly. It hadn't been touched in weeks. Not because she'd forgotten it, but because everything it contained was already settled. She placed a single postcard inside. The front showed a mountain range in soft twilight, likely printed from some gift shop Jenna had passed through. On the back, in faint blue ink, Thought of you when I saw this. Hope you're doing well. J. No address, no number, no apology, just vague goodwill from someone who once laughed when her husband raised his hand. Lorraine slid the card behind a notarized affidavit, between two tabs labeled Health Proxy and Post-Mortem Wishes. Then she closed the folder. That, too, was filed. Cliff met her the next morning, taking his usual chair near the window of the common area in Juniper Heights. The sun caught his glasses, and he had to adjust them twice while reading her most recent updates. You changed nothing? He asked, flipping through the pages. Nothing needed changing. He slid the folder back toward her, gently. That's rare. Most people amend their estate 3 or 4 times in the final stretch. Lorraine looked out toward the trees beyond the patio, where a light wind stirred the ivy on the stone wall. My first draft was written in fear, she said. The second in anger. This one's the only one I wrote clear. Cliff leaned forward, folding his hands. Any regrets? Lorraine didn't blink. Just that I waited until after the slap. The dinner was Marla's idea. No celebration, no ceremony. Just a table, a few chairs, and people who never made her flinch. Luke brought roasted chicken and fingerling potatoes. Marla brought a bottle of red with no label. Lorraine set the table with the last set of linens she'd kept from the old house. Gray, clean, no family crests. The food was simple, warm. The conversation even warmer. Not one raised voice. Not one sideways glance. Just laughter that didn't cut, and silence that didn't punish. Halfway through the meal, Luke asked, You ever miss it? The house? Lorraine poured herself a second glass of wine. Only the version of it I imagined, never the one I had. Marla raised her glass. To living past the fantasy. They clinked glasses gently. No fanfare. Just the soft chime of things done right. Later that night, after the dishes had been cleared and the wine put away, Lorraine stepped out onto her balcony alone. The sky above was clear and bitter blue, stars sharp enough to etch through darkness. Below, the garden paths wound through frost-covered bushes, quiet and gleaming under motion lights. No keys rattling in a door, no yelling from another room, no pacing footsteps that made her hold her breath, only stillness. And the subtle hum of heat through the walls. Lorraine pressed her palm flat against the glass and whispered, "This is what I kept the world away for." She turned, sat at her desk, and opened the same notebook she'd started that winter morning in Boise. On the last page, she wrote one final line. "They bruised my cheek. I broke their legacy." With a single signature. She capped the pen, set it down gently, and closed the book. Not with satisfaction, not with grief, with completion.